I was going to say good morning, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm searching hard and I'm not sure if there's even one lady in the room. If there is one, over there, great, two of us. Good start. This is typically one of the conferences where you don't have a queue in the ladies' room, which has its advantages, but I would like to see some more ladies in the room by next year. So, please go out and chase your female friends and girlfriends and to start coding, start becoming a developer, making their own businesses, because that's definitely one thing that we need. But that being said, I would like to know, not taking your sex into account, who is in the room more or less? Are all of you at this point entrepreneurs, developers looking to start your own business, developers looking to join a startup? What's basically your interest in being here today? That might help me to give all of the messages and all of the things that I've learned as an entrepreneur being active in the technology industry that I might share with you to make sure that it's a bit more tailor-made. So which one of you has a business of your own at this point in time? I know that you don't like to speak up, so waving is fine. Yeah, that's about 1/3. That's not bad, actually. And which ones of you are currently, either as a freelancer doing developer work or active in a company, but considering to start your own business anytime soon? Ooh, another third. Interesting. So most of you will either be active now, building your own business and doing probably not just coding, but a lot of sales and development in the marketing sense and go-to-market strategy and all those things. And that's probably slightly away from your comfort zone, as it used to be when I started out this particular venture, which is called startups.be. I'll explain in a second why I was invited to come here and talk about startup nations, which seems to be a big concept, but it's really not. We'll bring it right down to earth. But being a technology entrepreneur, as you are or will be very soon, hopefully, that's a peculiar type of business. That's a scalable business. That means that once you start out and you go online or become active as a business, you face worldwide competition from day one. And that's very different from starting a restaurant or a local shop, which has its challenges of its own. You're not going to hear me say that that's more easy, definitely not, but it has a different type of concept and different types of challenges. Being a technology entrepreneur, you're going to face competition, but also opportunities across the globe from day one. And that's interesting. That sets the scene in a totally different way from what we've been used to as Belgian and European entrepreneurs for decades and decades and centuries. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity at the same time, but it does mean that it's going to be very hard for you as an individual coder, developer, entrepreneur of whichever kind to go and conquer the world entirely by yourself. There are those individuals that are capable of doing that, but let's face it, most of us will need at least a bit of help and mentoring and support and people providing us with contacts and opening doors for us. And that's just fine. There's nothing wrong with asking other people to help us out. But finding those people can be quite challenging in this technology and startup industry. I used to be head of marketing of iMinds, which is a Flemish software institution working with university researchers to develop the solutions of tomorrow, software solutions of the next generation, let's call it that way. We found out about 10 years ago that most of those innovations after those big research projects ended, and they were full of promise. We had demos, we had proof of concept. These solutions were almost market ready. And even so, many of them never made it to the market, not through our industry partners and not through our researchers taking those innovations to the market themselves. And that was a pity. There were beautiful things in there, solutions that enabled long-term sick children to stay in contact with their classroom environment, catching up on all of the things that the class was learning and not falling behind on their learning curriculum, but also staying in touch with the social environment, not becoming socially isolated while they were in their sickbed at home or in the hospital, for example. If those innovations are developed and they are not taken to the market, then society loses out, to be frank, and that's a pity. It's not just a pity for the potential entrepreneur not making a huge business out of that. So Back then, we're talking 10 years ago, there was not that much around in Belgium, or in Europe for that matter, to help that type of innovators who were doing breakthrough stuff to bring those innovations to market. And luckily, a lot of things have changed in the last decade. There have been emerging a magnitude of initiatives to help you to take that type of innovation, whether it's a real technology breakthrough kind of thing, like developing the new type of battery, for example, or whether it's a business model breakthrough, or whether it's just social entrepreneurship, bringing better life quality to people and enabling them to do the things they want to do and be passionate about what they do. That really doesn't matter. There's so much support out there to help you, to coach you, to guide you, to introduce you, to enable you to network, to address your potential customers and your potential end users. And that's a good thing, but it's a challenge at the same time, once more. Because in the last decade, even in Belgium alone, more than 100 of those initiatives have emerged. Cool, very cool. But now it's tough for you to find out, if you're in health tech, which is the right training and coaching and mentoring program for you? Which would be the most suitable investor for you? If you're in ad tech, where do you turn? Where do you go? If you have a media company, if you have a business in financial solutions, who do you turn to? It's become this thick wood of all sorts of people that seem to be ready for you, but it's very hard to identify that person and that coach and that program and that investor that's going to take your business to the next level. And you as an entrepreneur in this scalable global business, you don't want to waste time trying to find out, networking for a year and a half before you find the right person that will help you along. You need it today, yesterday preferably, to be able to scale your business, because time is of the essence in this business. Because your competition is worldwide, you probably will not be the only one with a genius idea in your mind. Other people across the globe are developing similar things. If they're faster to the market, they're going to overthrow you, even if you were the first one and the best one. So that's the danger. You need that speed. In Belgium alone, over 100 initiatives are out there to help you. We created, with a number of technology entrepreneurs about 3 years ago now, a non-profit organization called Startup.be to bring them together, to unite them in a one-stop shop type of environment where we hope we can deliver more insights on who is doing what. But even after being active in this industry for 3 years already, even for me, it's hard. If you come up to me and ask me, okay, I'm in financial services, I'm looking for an experienced business coach, it's going to be hard for me to deliver that answer. That's how complex the ecosystem is, that's how fast it changes. But we're trying to bring it all together and to provide those value-adding matchmaking services to allow you as an entrepreneur to focus on your business, to find the right people to help you out, and to scale as fast as you can. That's basically what we've been doing at national level. Why at national level? Because if you're going abroad and you're talking to investors, for example, in the US or in Israel or in Singapore, they don't care about Flanders versus Brussels versus Wallonia. They don't care about Brussels versus Amsterdam. They just want to find the most talented entrepreneur, the best business and startup, the best market fit. That's what they care about. You need critical mass, you need a sufficient number, sufficient level of quality of professionalism to stand out in this international environment. And we face the same problem at European level, to be honest. Back when we started out with Startup.be, we were kind of a pioneer of this open innovation type of philosophy that everybody talks about, but in practice turns out to be very hard, to collaborate with whoever is out there. Is something that sounds good, but is very hard in practice. We were pioneering 3 years ago at European level. The same type of collaboration is opening up now. Incubators, accelerators, investors, coaches, mentors, all over Europe are trying to form associations and collaborative platforms to support you as an entrepreneur to become successful. It's moving in the right direction. We'll dive in more detail as to what's available in Belgium, just as a reference point, because I'm aware that probably some of you are not Belgium-based at all, but similar initiatives are emerging, though they might not be united in a local network yet. But across Europe, you see the same things going on. It's a very a diverse ecosystem of people out there to help you. You have on the upper right hand the incubators and the accelerators. That's basically coaching programs and environments where you can set up your business and be close to the people that might be able to support you and to help you out and to coach you on your way. And startup communities and event organizers to make sure you have all of these network opportunities that will bring you closer to your potential customers in the end. Obviously, you will need funding at some point, so there's different type of investors, ranging from banks, but also crowdfunding platforms, business angel networks, and communities, putting somewhat smaller money on the table, ranging to the big VCs, where you could potentially get up to 3, 5, 20, $60 million or euros at the point you're ready for that. All sorts of government initiatives out there to help you, really, much more than you might be aware of. You can get up to 50% funding from your local export agency in most countries if you are actually scouting a market abroad, which is what, as a technology entrepreneur, you will be doing a lot of the time. Half of your travel costs and your expenses could be subsidized through your local government if you apply for them. So be aware of the fact that that's out there. Many entrepreneurs don't even know. They're just doing their business, burning money on all sides. And it's a good thing being focused on your business. But if government is out there with instruments to help you, make sure you claim the money, right? There's lots of corporates ready to support you, either usually not with big bucks, but usually they do provide a lot of either business feedback if they are aware of your business. For example, a lot of corporations are now looking for collaboration with startups who are in a slightly similar industry to make sure that they can learn from you. They want to learn from your inspirational example. They want to learn from your awareness of what's going out in the market, what could be a potential threat for them. But on the other hand, they're also being more and more supportive in connecting you to their network. And a customer network of a company, of a multi-billion company with offices all over the globe, that can be a very valuable thing. If they want to introduce you to some of their biggest customers, you're going to come through the big door. You're going to come through at CIO, CTO, CEO level, which makes a big difference in your negotiation process and a big difference in the lead time that you will need to secure such a customer. So lots and lots of people out there. How are we trying to bring that all together? We've developed basically with Startups.be 2 main axes, which is on the upper side, being a one-stop shop, bringing all of that information together. And I know for some of you will have been surfing to our website and it's crap. I know. I need a good developer, by the way, to help me out with that. But we're a non-profit ourselves. We've started out with zero money ourselves. We just put our money where our mouth is. We started doing things even before we had money to do that. And to be honest, for the first 2 years, it was just me and an intern, trying and working hard and doing consultancy on the one hand to pay for the stuff that we just wanted to do, but nobody was paying for. So we've been pivoting and doing it the hard way ourselves. But now we finally have a team of 8 people in place that is trying to scale this business at a European level as well. So Marketplace, on the other hand, actually bringing you in contact through events, through social media, through newsletters that become more and more targeted. If you're telling us you're an early stage entrepreneur still developing your business, we'll try to find out based on the industry that you're in, which might be the interesting calls for startups, competitions, programs, or international opportunities that could be relevant for you, and we'll bring them in your lap if possible. But we've also been building a lot of expertise on what are startups, how are startups developing over time. Not our expertise as a team with Startups.be, but with all of the experts that are active in the programs and in the institutions that we're collaborating with, obviously. So this is a pool of over 100 people that have a lot of experience in coaching, nurturing, but also building that type of businesses. Experience in how to do due diligence, how to do negotiations for a potential takeover, how to do negotiations with investors, that type of thing. And that is all becoming accessible to you guys as well. If you're looking for something, let us know and we'll do our very best to connect you to those people and to help you along on your business. And in doing so, and that's the topic of today, obviously, we kind of, by accident, became a community builder. We became the voice of the startup community in Belgium and increasingly the voice of the startup community in Europe. There are actually now Euro commissioners like Commissioner Oettinger, who is responsible at European level for the digital agenda, so on how to drive digital innovation forward and how European Commission should support that. That type of people are actually looking our way now as a representative of you guys on what should they do to create this famous digital single market and enable you, if you launch your business in Spain, in Belgium, in Norway, whichever suits you best, to scale it across Europe in a more easy way. There's lots of obstacles today if you want to do that. Actually, it's a lot easier to start a business in the USA and to scale across the USA than it is today to launch a business in Europe and to scale across Europe. It's probably easier to launch a business in Europe and scale to the USA than to scale it across 28 European countries today. And that's a nuisance. That's an obstacle we need to take out of the way. And that's something European Commission is working very hard on, trying all sorts of things, and they're listening to your voice today to understand what you need and how they might set it up. And what's the cool thing about entrepreneurs is that they don't come complain. They don't come whine about all the things that are not good. They tend to come up with solutions. You're entrepreneurs, you see opportunity, you see solutions instead of problems. And that's very interesting about this ecosystem. That's why I love to be active in the startup ecosystem. We try to solve and fix the problem rather than complain about it. So this one-stop shop is there. Make use of it if you can. There's one event a year where we bring the entire ecosystem together, which is coming up in February in The Egg in Brussels, where we have over 1,000 people present, usually 80% entrepreneurs, 20% from the ecosystem, so mentors and experts and investors and such. So if you can, and if you're building or considering building your business, make sure to be there so you can come and meet all of them. There's similar events across Europe if you're not from Belgium, although you're very happy to join us, of course, because there will be an international crowd. But we're also trying to set up the other way around, and many different startup communities across Europe are doing the same today to build this kind of startup nation brand, each for their own country at the time, but we're trying to interconnect those national brands together to make sure that we can create soft landing opportunities, which means we try to make it easier for you to enter another European market. Right now we're looking export, so we're trying to get the most talented and the most ready Belgian startups on stage in different conferences and events and different pitching environments across Europe, but also beyond. We take Belgian startup delegations this week to Slush in Helsinki, which is a big tech conference. We've been to Web Summit in Dublin last week. We're taking them to NAB show in Las Vegas, which is a trade show for media companies, for example. We've been to Gamescom in Cologne to take gaming companies in this very specialized industry environment to give them speaking opportunities, pitching opportunities, demo opportunities, and also investor contacts at these big gatherings where their potential customers and their potential investors are. So it's not just about giving them visibility, it's mostly about giving them business opportunities. And that's something that is right now growing and scaling again across Europe. So make sure in whichever country you are, find out which are the platforms and the networks that are enabling you to do this. Because if we come to Web Summit, for example, or to Slush with a delegation of 10 to 15 Belgian startups in our case, it's much easier for us to attract the attention of the big investors. If each and every one of you has to reach out to those investors that never heard of you before, it's going to be very hard to stand out in the crowd and to grab their attention if there's thousands of people fighting over that same attention. And it's going to be even harder once you grab their attention to make sure that after they've heard 120 pitches throughout the day, that you're the one that they think about when they crawl into bed at night at such a conference. I can tell you I'm being pitched to a lot as well. It's very hard to remember all of that. So fighting for attention is tough and it's important at the same time. And grouping startups together makes it more attractive, more interesting for an investor to say, okay, I'm going to come over and meet your delegation. And within those 10 to 15 startups, probably I'm going to be interested in 2 or 3. And for the rest, I might provide some feedback, very hands-on, very fast. But those 2 or 3, I want to meet again after the conference. And that's what we want to secure. And so similar initiatives in Portugal and Spain, in Norway, and in Lithuania, everywhere across Europe, there are people being active to create those platforms, those jumping boards for you. So make sure you find out, you reach out, and you grab those go-to-market opportunities if they're there. Another thing going on across Europe with all of those Startup Nation type of initiatives is that they've started to launch databases, online databases of startups, which makes it easier for potential customers to find you, which makes it easier for potential investors to find you, or at least to research you a little bit and to benchmark your startup against other similar businesses across Europe. So make sure that you're there. Once you launch your business, you make sure that you can be found, not just through your own website and channels, but that you're in the most important startup directories across the world. You need to be in AngelList, for example, if you're looking for funding. There's, TechCrunch is an important one across worldwide databases, but most of your countries will probably have something similar. And of course, we're developing, we're maturing ourselves as Startup Nation initiatives. And over time, we hope to secure that if you're, as a Belgian technology entrepreneur, if you're in our database, that you are in all of the important databases across the world, because we hope to push that information, through to all sorts of third-party networks. But we're building ourselves. So make sure that you can be found. Very, very important step to take. And I was telling you before, we kind of almost by accident became the voice of the startup community. But I don't want to be the one, being a non-techie. I mean, I've studied Germanic languages of all things. I don't know anything about coding. I wasn't going to step up when our national minister for digital agenda, Alexander De Croo, he asked me early this year, say, Karen, would you like to join my task force for the digital agenda and voice the concerns of the local technology entrepreneurs? I was like, why on earth are you asking me? I don't know that much about technology. I don't know that much about startups either. How am I to know what could be the concerns of those technology entrepreneurs? But I wanted to grab the opportunity at the same time, because it was the very first time, in Belgium at least, that people were actually actively asking for your opinion. And that's important, because I want to make one point clear. Startups are not a minority group. And we need to make sure that they're not addressed as a minority group. You're an important economic force. And you need to make sure that you're considered an important economic force. You're going to be the drivers of the knowledge economy of tomorrow. You're going to be the ones democratizing our economy in a way we've never seen before. Having business run digitally and online has enabled everyone and anyone to either become an entrepreneur themselves, create a business, create a job, create economic activity for themselves, or to participate in a very democratic way. Right now, you can be a housewife and at the same time have an extra earning as an Airbnb provider of accommodation, as an Uber driver, I don't care which type, whatever makes you passionate. You can combine different professional activities. You can combine different economic activities based on what you need at a certain point in time, what you want to do. And that is going to be the biggest democratization ever. We faced the industrial revolution a couple of centuries ago. We're facing another type of revolution right now. And it's huge, it's massive. And you're going to be the enablers of that type of economy. So make sure you're not put in a corner. You're not a minority group. You're going to be the most important leverage in the economy of tomorrow. And you needed a voice. I understood that. But I didn't want to speak for you without knowing what you guys wanted and needed. And again, loving about you guys that you are solution-driven rather than whiners. I said, okay, fine, I'll do this. I'll voice the concerns. No, I won't voice the concerns of the startups and the technology entrepreneurs. I want to voice the solutions. What should we improve? If it's not all right today, the entrepreneurial climate in Belgium and Europe, what should we do differently tomorrow? And this is what you guys came up with. We crowdsourced for a couple of weeks. Deadline was a bit tight, sorry about that. We'll do it all over again next year, I hope, for Startup Manifesto 2.0. And there are already 12 Startup Manifestos out there across Europe at regional or national level, and many more coming. So make sure, again, to reach out to the people in your local environment that are developing this type of document, because it is important, it has an impact. And these were the 5 topics that came up. First of all, a startup is a peculiar sort of business. You know, it asks for a lot of investment, not just cash investment. If you're in hardware and infrastructure, there's a lot of cash involved already in the early stages. If you're in software, it could be or in software as a service, for example, or if you're in a business where you're actually leveraging other type of digital marketplace, for example, the investments are lower, but still in the early stages of such a business, you will not be earning money, let's face it. And I want to be very clear about that. You know, if you're going to launch a digital business, and you're going to step up to an investor, say, I need 2 million because I want to provide for a wage for myself for the next 3 years while I'm building this thing, you're going to get a big no as an answer. You know, the digital environment is great because there's lots of opportunity, but it's going to ask a lot of you as an entrepreneur as well. You're going to have to invest, at the very least, your own time. But the fun stuff is that you can do that. If you're ready to invest your time, you can actually build this business without having €1 million in your bank account upfront. But it is a peculiar type of company, and it is very hard to hire staff in Europe because it's very costly to hire staff and even more costly to fire staff, and hard. Sometimes you can't even get them out the door, which is a nuisance. So there's lots of things that are not exactly ideal for launching this type of business in a European environment. And that's why you guys propose to have this different type of statute, like you have student entrepreneurship now in many countries, which allows you certain exceptions and certain special rules, apart from the mainstream. We would propose a similar type of statute for a startup company, which allows for tax exemptions, for example, on the first hirings, or for prolonged periods for paying that type of taxes. And that's actually one of the things that came through first. Just a couple of weeks after the Startup Manifesto was launched, which was handed over in a presentation similar to this one to Alexander de Croo and his entire task force, with a press conference, lots of media there. 4 weeks later, he announced that this Startup Inc. type of thing, they call it differently, but it was included in his startup plan. And it did include, for example, a tech shelter for angel investments, which is one of the points below those topics that we were asking for. It enables people to put up to €100,000 into your business and get tax incentives for that. Because there's a lot of money out there, dear gentleman and dear lady. There is a lot of money in the bank accounts of the people around you. Lots of people that might believe in you, that might want to invest in you. But, being very conservative and being very savings type of people as Europeans, there is a threshold there. This tax shelter is actually lowering that threshold. It's making it financially more interesting to put €100,000 into your business and getting tax incentives out of that, over having it in their savings account at near to zero interest. So that allows you as an entrepreneur, because the fact that you said, this is what we need, this would be a potential solution, a couple of weeks later, it's there. It was officially granted by the government early July. There's still a couple of issues with the way they're implementing it, but we're on the right way. Tax shelter for angel investments is there. Buy from startups. The second thing that you guys called for is stop pampering us. We're entrepreneurs, We can take care of ourselves. We don't need all this nitty-gritty mentoring type of thing in the end. What we need is customers. You need to buy from us. You need to stop doing big tenders and granting lots of money to the big corporations out there. We have better solutions. We want to be heard. We want you to buy from us. And that's actually what some governments and some companies have started doing since. The Antwerp government started actively buying from startups. In the last 6 months, they've launched a couple of problem topics, here, the city that we're in today, rather than saying we're going to launch a big tender with specifications 50 pages long, which no entrepreneur wants to read front to back, with contracts hanging over your head of 500 pages, which definitely no entrepreneur wants to read or even can read, because it's all lawyer speak. They're just posing problems out there, and they're asking for you guys to come up with solutions. smaller solutions, not $5 million solutions, small things that you as a business, as a startup can provide to improve the city operations and the city environment. 21 startups have started contracts with the Antwerp city government since. A number of big corporations have launched Buy From Startups hackathons and type of events to better understand what you guys are providing and how they might become a customer of yours. So it helps to put your voice out there. People are listening, so make sure you cry out. I mean, I know it's far from your comfort zone, but step up and cry out as loud as you can whenever you get the opportunity. And we'll be there. We're listening to and we'll be helping you. So make sure if you have, that type of proposals for us, others, educate and cultivate. It's obvious that we need to teach people about these opportunities. That we need to teach more people to code. And a combination of 3 and 4, paying it forward, which means that, entrepreneurs that have had a good run, they're willing to give something back. They're willing to do mentorship. They're willing to do investments. Most of the business angels out there are actually, succeeded entrepreneurs that are putting some of the money that they earn by selling their businesses successfully back into the community. They're out there to help you, but not just with cash, also with their networks and with their expertise, which is cool. But it also means that we, at the point in time that we're still investing, even we can do something. I can be out here and come and talk to you. I don't get money for this. I'm, I'm not losing business, but at least I'm not doing business at this point in time to help my own business forward. But I'm very willing to do this for you, to share whatever I have learned in the last 3 years about the technology ecosystem with you, to hopefully help you along one small step. And I'm sure many of you are doing the same. And that's also part of paying it forward. And being, most of you, very technical profiles, and there being a big lack of those across Europe, there's many programs out there that are helping both youngsters and, more mature professionals to learn coding. So if at some point you say like, I want to do this, I want to pay it forward, I want to contribute to society, help other entrepreneurs on their way, this is something that you could do fairly easily. Maybe you can help, maybe you can join one of those coding camps. You have Le Wagon in Paris and in Brussels, for example, teaching people in the 9 weeks time frame to actually build their own prototype, which is something that's become more or less doable if it's a fairly simple business. Maybe you can join one of those training programs for kids and for youngsters to learn them the basics of coding. That's going to make a huge difference in their lives. So make sure entrepreneurs love to contribute. They love to create solutions. Make sure if there's anything out there and you want to share, don't hesitate, do this. You're going to make a big difference in people's lives if you do. And most of all, and that's the hardest part for Belgians at least, it's be proud. We need to talk about successes. We need to talk about the things that we're doing. And we equally need to talk, even if we're proud, about the failures. We've created this conference, and we're now active in a European project to try and get the topic of failing and failing forward out there. We're being punished harshly if we fail across Europe, and that's stupid. In the US, if you step up to a big investor and it's your first time project, your first startup ever, they're going to laugh you out the door and they're going to tell you, you go and do this and play around a little bit, and by the time you reach your 5th startup, come back, because you will have learned, other people will have paid you to learn, and you come back when you know how it's done. Failure is being considered over there as a learning process. It's part of a learning process. Failing forward. You don't tell a kid when he falls off his bike for the 20th time, maybe you're never going to learn. Maybe you should stay on the ground. I don't think a bike is something for you. Have you ever met a kid that in the end did not learn to ride a bike? I haven't, Some need more time than others, granted. And we as entrepreneurs, some need more help and some need more time than others, and that's fine. But in the end, they learn to ride the bike, right? Because we keep telling them, maybe you should consider this, maybe you should try that. We help them a bit, we hold them a bit, and in the end, they learn to ride a bike. And it's the same with failing and with entrepreneurship. You learn by doing. But they need to allow you to do, to practice, to become a really good and a really successful entrepreneur. And we need to allow people to do that. And we need to be willing to keep putting money in entrepreneurs that may have had a failed project in the past, and that's fine. In our Failing Forward conference, which Nelly Cruz opened 2 years ago, she actually said, if you've never failed, you probably never tried hard enough. It was kind of confronting, I thought. But it's true in the end, stretching yourself, taking risks, putting yourself out there, that's what it's about. And if you do that properly, chances are that you're going to fail, at least small time or big time, you're going to fail at some point, and that's just fine. So let's nurture each other, talk about the failures as well as the successes, be there for each other, and cheer each other on for the next project. That's fine. In having your voice out there, many of the things we already discussed, so lots of things have been changing. So you can actually change the world bit by bit, which is huge in itself. And just a couple of examples with those tech shelters already being mentioned, the city of Antwerp starting to buy from startups, FIDIC, which is the federal agency in Belgium for ICT, actually being a broker in between all of the local, regional, national, and European governments and the ICT and technology industry. They've started a big project on open data and on buying from startups from a government perspective. They're actually spending, one full-time equivalent, which is already, a good investment, on learning to understand how to work with you guys and, innovate the way that government is operating at local and at national level. There's European associations and European initiatives like ours that are emerging. I would never have expected 3 years ago when I started Startups.be, I thought we're so much behind. I was looking at the Amsterdam and the Berlin and the Paris ecosystems in London and was going they're so vibrant. How are we ever going to catch up? Being this tiny nation with all of these infighting and internal problems, how will we ever catch up? People, we did. We're not the biggest startup city yet in Europe, but that's the whole problem of Belgium. We're not, well, actually we are one big city. We need to consider Belgium as one big city. We're close to the population of New York, ladies and gentlemen. That's how we need to behave. And we need to interconnect those startup cities or startup hubs or startup regions, however you want to call them. Neelie Kroes is not that stupid, She launched all of this digital stuff at European level, and then she went back to the Netherlands. And the first thing that she did was that she created the Startup Delta. It's not just about Amsterdam anymore. She created a region which includes Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and Eindhoven, 3 of their biggest technology hubs, and she joined them into one project, one brand, Startup Delta. And then if you have a marketing front like Neelie Kroes, that helps a lot, of course, but now Startup Delta is amongst the 20 biggest startup communities in the world. Amsterdam on its own even would have made it that far. That's how it's done. You need to open up, you need to partner. You need to be able to work together to create bigger quality, bigger platforms, and make sure that you stand out there. And once you do, success follows, believe me. We've had a couple of examples at the Startup Nations Summit where we could, each startup nation across the world could nominate one startup. One startup could go over there and pitch in a big pitching competition. And just 1 year ago, more or less today, an Antwerp entrepreneur actually won one of the major competitions over there. He got PR attention across the globe because of that. Being a startup nation, you can put your people out there. You can create those opportunities for them. Same thing with these go-to-market type of campaigns. In one of our last Go Global campaigns, or early this year at least, at the Next Web in Amsterdam, one of the biggest web conferences in Europe, one of the Belgian startups won the major competition, won an investment prize of 100,000 euros. And you know what? They turned it down. Well, they accepted the honor and the award, but they turned down the 100,000 euros because it came with strings attached. And they had, the lucky position of saying, no, we've got a $3 million or euro type of investor standing by, and he doesn't want to share for 100,000 euro a couple of our shares with you. So thanks, but no thanks. We'll take the honor, we'll take the award, but you can keep the money. How cool is that, And that's what we need to do. We need to create a platform for people like you. So you can concentrate on your business because the right mentors and the right people are out there. And, the stage is yours. It's going to be you standing up here next time. And believe me, it's a bit uneasy, especially if the stage is this big. But you'll do fine. Don't hesitate. I didn't used to be on stage like this either. I still, sleep badly before I have to do this type of thing. And you will too for a couple of years. But you get the hang of it. You can do this, so make sure that you practice whenever you can with your kids, with your wife, with your girlfriend, with your friends. Make sure that you practice in pitching, being on stage, being in front of people, telling your story and being very passionate about it, because that's what's going to make you different. You care about what you do. You wouldn't be here if you didn't, you know? And that passion is what's going to make the difference. But you need to do that. Be aware of that, and don't be afraid of that. It's fine. You're going to survive. Nobody was killed on stage yet, or at least not in this type of environment, so don't worry. And there's lots of people standing by to capture your story. You won't always have to be on a stage like this. You can talk to journalists, you can talk to bloggers, you can talk to all sorts of people that will tell your story for you. And you will be in the press and in the attention and the visibility worldwide. And that's fun. It doesn't seem like it could be, maybe, but it's fun. It's going to be okay. So make sure, to ride the journey, to start out with being inspired, listening to other people, seeing how they're doing it, reading a lot about this type of thing, going to conferences to hear other entrepreneurs share their experience and how they've done it, what they've learned from it, what they've taken away. But start doing as soon as you can. For those, luckily, a lot of you are already in action, so maybe you can share after this session with the other ones how you're doing and what you're experiencing. But for the ones that put up their hands saying, like, this is something I want to do, but I'm not just there yet, don't wait too long. I mean, it's never going to be the right point in time, never ever. You just need to go out there. Start putting minimal viable products out there, talking to your customers. What do you think about it? What do you think about that? Is there anything we need to change? How would you like to buy this, yes or no? How much would you pay for that? Talk to your customers. That's going to be the toughest part. Listening to their feedback, understanding that it's not criticism of you as a person, it's constructive feedback on your product, and your product will need development, but you need to start talking to your customers as soon as possible. Even if it's only a drawing on paper, go out there with your drawing and ask your customers what they think, because you're going to build a way better product if you've got that feedback early on. And that's what we're being taught wrongly in most schools. We're being taught to finish something and polish it and make sure that it's fully ready and perfect and all that you want before we want to take it out there. And that's not what a technology entrepreneur should do, because you're going to do a huge investment and you're going to be too late if you wait for that perfect product. You need to get out there, try it out, experiment, talk to people. And if you want to benchmark what you're doing, if you've got this idea in your head, we've been working on the Belgian startup ecosystem and the metrics that we have about all of the incredible, cool companies out there with Omar Mohout, who's growth engineer at Ciris. It's a knowledge center that's used to be part of Agoria, which is a technology federation in Belgium. We have a database of about 1,400 Belgian startups that we mapped out, and so we're trying to build insights on that. What are we good at as a region? What are we less good at, bad at? Some things might need to be improved, but at least we can gather insights, metrics that you can benchmark against. We're now searching for databases from different startup nations, first of all across Europe, to see if we can interconnect them and to see if we can learn about Europe as a region. And is London the biggest fintech hub in Europe, yes or no? I mean, they're claiming to be, and they might be, but we don't know for sure. And that's something funny. There's all this talk about startups and all this talk and a lot of energy going into the startup ecosystems and the startup nations. But there's actually not that much that we know for sure. There's even not one single definition about what a startup is. And some make a distinction between a startup and a scale-up. Growth companies are called scale-ups in Europe. And then in the US, they don't. They just call them startups. You can be IBM and more or less be a startup in their eyes. So we need to make sure that we back this up with data and with metrics to understand what we're talking about. And that's still going on right now. So you're still in a very immature market, I'm afraid, as a startup, but that's fine, because we ourselves are also out there trying, testing, talking to customers, and trying to make it better. Practice what you preach. That's going to be important the next couple of decades for sure. So just speaking for Belgium, for those 1,400 startups that we mapped out, we're definitely a B2B country. No big surprise there. I think Belgium has a history of being more B2B oriented than B2C. So that's being confirmed by the numbers. But surprisingly, if you look at industries, ad tech, advertisements, branding type of technology, that came out on top. We didn't see that one coming. Manufacturing was more, what we expected. We've got a big history there, but we know that it's draining and it's whining, so it's probably not going to, be around for that much longer. But technology in doing end-to-end manufacturing and that type of thing is still very hot in Belgium, still very active. Health tech was another one that could have been expected. There's good social security, good health system in Belgium, so it kind of makes sense that we're pretty active in all of the technology that surrounds that type of health environment and health provision. Coming up is fintech, everything having to do with financial services, kind of disrupting the big banks, which makes them very anxious and very eager to be active and to talk to you guys to understand what's going on and how they might need to reinvent themselves over time. And one of the emerging industries is actually HR tech. We're still being very conservative about how we hire people, how we find people, how we recruit people, select people. That's something that's probably going to be disrupted over the next decade and might not take that long. So interesting to watch, Over time, we hope to see the trends and the evolutions in that. Are there certain industries rising? Are there certain industries fading away? Interesting to look at. If you look at, how big are they, how old are they, how are they doing as to, business turnover, that type of thing, many of them are still considered startups, which in the definition of Omar at least, a startup is a startup as long as it's not, well, there's a difference in Belgium at least between what we call an ISBL, no, not an ISBL, BVBA, that's the one. So it's kind of a smaller company, doesn't require a lot of investment up front, putting money safely away to build your business. So there's different for Belgium. There's a difference in startup and scale up in there. Once you're what's called an NV, naamloze vennootschap in Flemish, for example, then you automatically become a scale up because it requires a lot of cash up front, and that kind of comes with the assumption that you've got that cash to put in that type of thing, which is not in your core business creating revenues, so that says something about your business. The number of people in your staff, the turnover, that type of metrics are taken into account to distinguish. But surprisingly low is the debt pool. We know for a fact that, from looking at the projects around us, that near to 90% of the projects that start out don't make it into a bigger company. 90% fail in whichever way, or die away. So how come only 8% are actually businesses that are officially taken out of business, that are either bankrupted or close the books and go away? That shows that there is a big problem in our legislative context. These businesses are not officially shut down. They just stop doing business, more or less. But they're still around. So how many of those startups in that 49% are actually living dead? We don't know. We're looking now for metrics to see if we can identify how many of those 49% startups are actually not that active or pretty much dead without us knowing it for sure. Because they might not want to close the business because they would consider it as a failure and they don't want to have the failure on their resume, because it costs you a bit of money to close down your company and they just don't want to invest that type of money in closing the company and therefore let it live on forever, that type of thing. So we're looking for metrics on how to distinguish between that. Interesting to look at that type of metrics. What I also found interesting was the big boost in the number of startups in 2010. And at first I didn't understand, but then Omar did some more research and he explained to me that that's about the point in time when technology became a commodity. It became affordable and accessible for a multitude of people. You can pretty much, all of us at this point in time can afford to buy a laptop, go on the internet, learn to code and do something, create a business out of that. That was not the case before. You needed expensive servers, and you needed expensive technology, and you needed investments in the tens of thousands of euros to be able to start a business. That stopped in 2010, and that spawned a huge boost in the number of startups. And another one is coming, or was coming, end of last year, early this year, because of the fact that in many countries the funding schemes opened up. Following the trend after a couple of years of having more businesses around, the investors became more interested and cash was coming on the table. So lots of opportunities there. It's the right time to start this type of venture. Just, as a reference, 2014, we had a couple of companies, bringing in the big bucks in Belgium, which was a good sign. But if you compare that to 2015, and the year is not over yet, not just the number of companies that acquire over $1 million is growing fast, but the amount that they're raising is also being tripled, quadrupled. So that's a good sign that we're actually breathing companies that can grow sufficiently and that can secure and convince big investors to put big time money on the table to become global players, hopefully, at some point. If you want to know, and for the ones that are a bit aware of the type of companies that we have around, these are a couple of examples of companies that did acquire, that were bought, that were sold in the course of this year. That's another way of bringing in cash, starting over potentially with that cash for a new venture. So these companies were acquired by other bigger customers, or companies rather. And these are a couple that are now in the 1 million euro club, that they raised at least 1 million, and some of them many more in just the last couple of months, let's say. If you're looking at regional spread for Belgium, for example, interesting to see that our capital is bringing in most of the startups. Probably not surprisingly, being the most international environment, obviously, in our tiny country. But if you look at the different provinces, so smaller regions within Belgium, interesting to see that Antwerp, where we are today, is kind of heading after our capital. And even more interesting, especially for some of our policymakers, is that our Walloons, the French-speaking provinces, are doing badly at this point in time, and they're investing heavily to solve that issue. But having that type of metrics gives you a benchmark. It gives you a more or less objective idea of what's going on and what might need to be improved or might need to be done. What could be an interesting investment or an interesting industry to go into, and which might not. Regions, startup cities across Belgium. But also interesting is, where do our companies launching from Belgium start their second and third office? Still, one out of three chooses USA as the first foreign branch, let's say. But apart from that, people are still very much focused on the surrounding countries. Not that hard to explain, with Europe still being very closed off as a market. It's very hard still for a Belgian company to enter Finnish market or the Spanish market, but something that we need to work on. Because if we want to create unicorns and the big companies, which we don't have at this point in Belgium, to be honest, then we need to do something about this. We need to create a bigger home market for them, and we need to make sure that they can get out of that tiny circle of surrounding countries, not being as dependent on the USA to be able to scale. University spin-offs, some of you might be coming from university recently or in the more distant history. These are the universities that are doing well in bringing those researchers and those innovations to market at present. Probably most interesting for them to compare amongst each other. It's kind of a competition. And then just a couple of fun metrics. What type of domain name are they taking? It's kind of interesting to us to see where their ambition lies. If you launch with the .be type of URL, that says something about the type of customers that you want to attract and where your focus is. Which is not to be saying that a .be domain is not okay, or that you shouldn't launch your business on a Belgian domain name. That's fine, but it's interesting to look at how many companies think globally from day one and are aiming globally from day one. Again, on the legal setup, which says something about, again, ambition level and the type of business that they want to run. And then just to give you a quick idea of just the Belgian market alone, what is out there as to support. We're not going to describe all of them in detail. You can find out more either through our website or ask, and we'll put you in touch, everything you want. But just to have an idea, accelerators. So these are just programs in a limited number of weeks or months, helping you, coaching you, mentoring, to get your company either from idea to startup or from startup to a bit more maturity, enabling you in your go-to-market strategy and acquiring new customers for you. That many programs are actually around in Belgium. 10 million people have this many options to choose from. Startup studios, something similar. All those programs out there helping you to take the next step in your business. If you're focused on hardware, you have lots of choices, even in Belgium, tiny country. If you want to partner up with a big corporation, loads and loads of companies are stepping into that scene, are setting up coaching programs, go-to-market programs to help you out, to reach out to you and to learn from you, but also to open up their network and their expertise. If you're in media, lots of choice across Europe as well, for that matter. Media companies are really waking up to see the dawn and understanding that disruption is coming from the outside and that they're lagging behind, and they want to understand. They want to partner up with you to be able to survive, but also to help you to thrive and to become bigger. Banks, already discussed, and in Belgium alone, and I think actually Belfius is the fourth one moving a bit more aggressively into the scene. 3 major banks are heavily investing, I'm talking millions, into investment funds, into acceleration programs, into incubator buildings where they're hosting startups like you. So these big fish are actually really, really eager to work with you. Make use of that. If you're in food tech, certain niches are doing incredibly well. If you're in clean tech, another example, certain niches are becoming that important because in the case of food tech, we're moving back to local production. We're kind of the next industrial era coming is going to be organized in a totally different way with 3D printing on the way, for example. So we're just going to bring in all of the basic goods, and we're going to do the manufacturing very small scale, locally, very tailor-made. That's where we're going. So food tech is going to be huge. It's going to be really important. A couple of initiatives focusing just on that. If you just want to short-term hook up with a number of people and do this kind of sprints in 3-4 days with your business, doing kind of business validation, business testing, do a sprint development with a couple of other people, then a hackathon or a startup weekend could be an interesting format for you. A massive amount of initiatives out there that will help you to just do that one-off big jump forward and test your case and talk to people. Looking for money? Don't come and tell me that there's no money out there. There's a huge number of VC funds, smaller and bigger, out there, business angels and business angel clubs out there. The problem is not that they're not out there. The problem is that you might not know today how to reach them, who to reach out to, how to reach them, to grab their attention and to convince them, because investors, I wouldn't know how to step up to one and convince them either. So what's probably required is not the fact that there's no money out there. What's required is that we, who might have those contacts, help you to reach them and help you prepare for such a talk. So it's up to us to be better at what we do rather than the money not being out there. But they're there. Don't worry. Crowdfunding in itself, especially when you're in a B2C market, crowdfunding could be a very interesting format for you to see. It's business validation at the same time as it's acquiring funding. And there's many platforms launching right now. Angel investments already discussed. All sorts of programs to help you internationalize, to jump on that international scene, and to make sure that you move forward and that you have this global vision and that you acquire customers not just in your own startup nation, but across the globe. And as to industry, I think personally, fintech and insurance is the one that's going to be disrupted. If not tomorrow, if not yesterday, then probably tomorrow. They have this big hit coming, and they don't see it coming right now. So that's a big opportunity for the innovators that are going to be in that scene. But there's also like a revival of the hardware industries. So if you're in hardware, there's a very interesting era coming up. HR tech already discussed, and also don't forget that there's lots of opportunities in the sharing, in the peer-to-peer community and economy. If you're able to enable people to work with each other, create a direct connection between customer and provider, then you're probably going to be in a good spot for a couple of decades to come as well. So actually there's no real reason why not to take your idea, your business, your venture out there and just try that and go. And that's what I would advise you to do. Like, take your idea, start talking, start doing. Reach out to the people that are out there that I hopefully convinced you of the fact that there's many people out there that are willing to help you, capable of helping you. We're still struggling a bit, to get the right ones under your nose, but still they're there. Go out and find them. Go pitch and do your thing, do what you're good at. That being said, I'll be out the door if you have very practical questions. I think we have 2-3 minutes left. If you have this burning question, you can step up right now. Otherwise, I'll see you at coffee. Thank you very much for now.